Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this Saturday afternoon. My name is Sasa Kayinde. I am here with Mr. Justin Bahunga, former diplomat in Uganda, and Mr. Celestine Sengiyumva, also a former diplomat and author on all things in the Great Lakes region. I'm going to let them introduce themselves further, let us know where we can read more about their work, etc. Mr. Celestine, if you can begin, please. You're just unmuted. Unmute yourself.
I thank you. I'm grateful that you introduced me to participate in this conversation. I'm Celestine Sengiyumva. I'm a former diplomat in Addis Ababa, the hub of the African diplomacy. And I now live in northwest of the state of New York. And I'm delighted to be part of this exchange. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bahunga.
Yeah. My name, as you said, I'm Justin Bahunga, a former diplomat. I live now in the UK, and I'm so glad that you have invited me to this conversation, and together with my brother Celestine. I hope this will profit other people. And I think really it is important to mention this, and that I think the audience, the English audience, is so important that to think of addressing yourself to it is equally important.
Yes,
Thank you.
I do agree. Thank you. Thank you. So today's discussion, we're going to discuss about the ongoing crisis in Eastern DRC, or the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, previously also known as Zaire. It's very difficult to separate the history of Eastern DRC from the history of Rwanda. But today we're going to try to speak about the ongoing war, or the return to a hot war from what seemed to have been a period of stability and peace. So historically and culturally, most people don't, well, I think most of our viewers would know, but both Rwanda, Burundi, and Congo were at a point colonized by the Belgians, and that within that, after African nations became independent, we then see a fracture or a separation of what was really one linguistic family or a group of people within the Great Lakes region who had natural borders, but those borders were cut up once colonialism ended. So if you could both give a sort of quick summary or your thoughts on how the colonial period plays a part to our current problem, particularly in the question of borders and what is Eastern DRC and what is Rwanda. Okay. We can start with you, Mr. Bahunga, and then we'll go to Mr. Celestine. That's okay.
Thank you very much indeed. I think it is quite important that you ask that question, because it will help us to understand what's happening today. As you will recall, when the colonial powers started to partition Africa, most of the regions were still in a state formation process. And you will see when, for instance, the current government says in Rwanda that we ought to occupy, to be part of Congo and part of Uganda, actually is misunderstanding the whole process or dynamics of history at that time. Because like in Europe, the issue of state came about in 1641, and with the Conference of Westphalia. Otherwise, you would have the King of England having a right to the throne of a certain kingdom in France. You've had over this 100 years war, you have got 30 years war. And at that time, that you had now to set borders. So in Africa, it is the same, that in a piece of our region, that when the colonial powers came, they found this process of state formation, and it is them that said, now these are the borders. And while doing it at the Berlin conference, is like sharing a cake. You're just cutting this in my piece, this the other piece, this the other one's piece. They didn't take care of tribes or the groups which went across the border. I'll give one simple example. There was a time in Uganda at the border with Kenya when you had brothers, one an MP, a member of parliament in Uganda, another member of parliament in Kenya. Because after the border with the countries, we have got different farms, one part in Uganda, one part on the other side. And that's for that reason that in 1963, when Organization of African Unity was set, the charter said clearly that we cannot go back to question the boundaries set by colonial powers. Because they knew there would be a problem if they started to say, this is mine, this is across the border. And this brings me to a very serious question about Rwanda. So if I go very far, is that in 1999, the Organization for African Unity commissioned experts or a panel of eminent personalities to write about genocide in Rwanda.
In the 60s?
And in 1999, in its report, it said, in the report, which came out in July 2000, they urged African leaders that they're anxious of the doctrine of Rwanda, or current government in Rwanda, that feels it can intervene in other countries to support what they consider to be their king and the keys, as it was out to 24 years ago. So that's to show the problem of the border. Now, if we came, and then we come now to Congo and Rwanda, again, I think it's one to point out that on the border between Rwanda and Uganda and the Congo, which was there at that time, the issue remained the same, that at the time of the colonial powers coming in, we had the people of Rwandan or speaking the same ethnic group on both sides of the border. And it's important to note that the North Kivu, where there is a problem now, the area of Ruchuru and the Masisi, between 60 and 80% are people who could say of Rwandan origin. They would say the same culture, with same language. And the other tribes, which we call the other three tribes, Nande, Hunde, and Nyanga, they are minority. It is in Rwanda 1 to 3, and those people of Rwandan origin are both Hutu and Tutsi. But unfortunately, we see that the people of Hutu, but that's what I have to know. And by the way, this area of North Kivu is twice the size of Rwanda. I think people have to know. Rwanda is on 6,038 square kilometers, whereas North Kivu is 59,450 square kilometers. It's more than twice. So when you're not to speak of the war, I think it's important to know the size and how the population that lives there.
With that in mind, I was wondering if I could just, if I could just cut you off. I wanted to bring in Mr. Sengiyumva here with a little Mr. Bahunda summarized us about particularly the history of the Berlin Conference. Who would you say are some of the important players in the region, and how would you say history that Mr. Bahunda just shared with us molded these players?
Thank you. The main players involved in this region or in this crisis, as we speak, are not only the peoples or the governments of Rwanda and Congo. We have foreign interests. Foreign interests. And also, as Bahunga said, we have also, we are still in a state of, in a situation of state formation. It is still going on in the region. And our leaders are still learning how to be, between inverted commas, national leaders. National leaders. And that is a part of the problem we are facing, because our leaders who are still learning how to be national leaders get involved in flawed political processes, which produce leaders or government leaders with no or insufficient legitimacy, so that at the end of the day, you find our leaders just fighting to keep themselves in power instead of fighting their way to leave power into the hands of other leaders, and into the hands of other products of regular political processes. So that that would be my my assessment of this situation, whereby we find that Rwanda is involved in the crisis in Eastern Congo over the minerals of Congo, but Rwanda has no mineral industries. We don't have manufacturing industries. So these minerals must be ferried to wherever they need to go, to the north, that is to the west. And the interest Rwanda has in all this process is that the West would protect the leaders. No, that is Rwanda and Congo. The West would protect the leaders' flawed elections. The West would approve, as they did recently in Congo. They would ratify clearly flawed and illegally organized electoral processes. We saw it very recently in Congo. The West came in unison to ratify the election of the president of Congo, today's president of Congo, totally ignoring the opposition people who were crying foul. So now he has, the president of Congo has said interest in going along the lines, along the wishes of his sponsors, as does the president of Rwanda. And this is, according to me, this is really part of the crisis, because I think that if we could have regular political processes, if we could have no rigged elections, if we could have national governments, the crisis which is now raging in Eastern Congo would not be there, because the leaders would understand that the best interests of our population lies in cooperation and peaceful existence. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to bring back Mr. Bahunda. When you first started speaking, Celestine, you brought in foreign interests. There is something I often think about, but I don't know if it's too simple-minded. But essentially, when I try to explain to people the connection with Rwanda and Congo, I tell them, Habyarimana said no, but Kagame said yes. But I can't quite expand to them what the yes or no is. So, Mr. Bahunda, what is the current state of diplomacy and military affairs? If you're able to, for example, give us a quick summary of that picture in the last maybe 10 years and how it has now resurfaced again. And so if you could tie, the state of diplomacy, military affairs with the foreign interest that drive all this.
Yeah, I think this issue of what we are seeing, I call it a tip of an iceberg. Meaning, actually, it is something just on the surface, and you're hiding something bigger than it is. Why? Is that there's no way you can explain, for instance, that a small country like Rwanda, which depends 43% of its budget is funded by the externals. 70% of public expenditure from outside the aid. It can afford to invade, occupy a country which is 80 times bigger than it is. By the way, Congo is 2.4 million square kilometers, while Rwanda 26,000 square kilometers. As I was saying, even the North Kivu is twice bigger than Rwanda. So and also for historical records, Rwanda invaded Congo twice together with Uganda. First of all, it was with Burundi and Uganda. Second phase, 1998, that was with Uganda. And the two invasions cannot attribute them to Rwanda, and Rwanda go away with it with impunity unless there are some external forces which are behind Rwanda. Even this war, you have seen that there was the US, the National UN Security Council, has clearly stated that Rwanda has got troops in the Congo that it supports a UN sanctioned Group 23. You have no sanctions, and you ask yourself, what kind of power, what the force Rwanda can have to defy with impunity the instruction, the injunction of the United Nations Security Council. Coming back to that, so we come back now to the present crisis. There's what they call, I think, for instance, we talked about it, what we call transnational war economy, meaning that government officials collude with rebel leaders and businesses to loot mineral resources of a country to sustain the war. And what is sustaining? Because these groups are not interested in having the war end. I remind you again that in 2001, there was UN report on looting of Congolese resources, and its conclusions that at 85 multinationals in the DRC, 57 companies, and 29 individuals exploited the resources of the Congo. So the war, in essence, has got the international dimension, which Celestine talked about, but there is also the regional dimension of having Uganda, especially in Rwanda, exploiting the resources of the DRC. And this also has been documented by UN. So these interests, I mean, and again, at the local level, again, as I was saying before, there is the local businesses that deal with flooding the minerals to Rwanda and to Uganda. I was seeing that, for instance, I was saying the UN Treasury for 2021 that 90% of the gold of Congo goes through Uganda and Rwanda. Wow. So these interests, but so there is the local element of local politicians. That's why we have to say 135 local militias, and these belong to local businesses and politicians who use them as leverage to have power in Kinshasa.
So the
Meaning
leadership,
this,
I was going to ask, so the leadership, in a sense, has turned the crisis into an economic system.
it's not the Congolese government. I'm saying there's not international ramifications. They're both regional, we'll say Rwanda and Uganda. We may Burundi, I think, a little bit. But international level, these multinationals that actually exploit the resources of the Congo and they use Rwanda and Uganda as a conduit. And indeed, this report, the UN report, says that Rwanda has become a gateway to outside the markets of these resources. And not only that, recently, Kagame was on record saying that these minerals pass through our country and they have a problem. They're accusing me of that. But he said, even if I allow them to go through, I would have a problem. So what I want to say is that this war in this time Congo has got ramifications is exploitation of the mineral resources of Congo. And the people involved, the stakeholders, I was saying, locally, we have got to local authorities, local leaders, who have got, and the businesses who have got their personal armies. And they bring to the question, now we come to government, the issue is that normally the sign of a state, we're talking about states, is the kind God has got the monopoly of violence over the other sources. So meaning what is happening now in the Congo in terms of the local level of government is it has no control over its territory. And therefore has created a vacuum for this small group to take over. And of course, which are being used by neighboring countries for their economic interests. I know what that makes is clear.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for, oh, sorry. I thought you had another point to add.
What I was saying is it's very important that we see this connection, that this economic factor, what we call the transnational war economy, which profits, and this is being facilitated by the absence of the state of DRC in certain areas. And I was listening, very interestingly, to the Minister of Industry of the Congo, who was the governor in the Kivu for 12 years. And he was giving an example, it was the same thing that I was saying, the absence of the state, or the absence of the instrument of the state, that's the police, the army, and the judiciary, and leaving everyone to look after themselves. And he was giving an example saying, for instance, I was saying, there's one policeman per 156 square kilometers. Whereas, for instance, in Rwanda, where you have got 26,000 square kilometers, but got 33,000 soldiers. So, and
the difference is quite glaring. I notice the difference.
So the effort of the government now for the Congo now, the key issue we are saying is it is now to make the government present in every area in an effective way, with the police, with the army, and with justice.
Thank you so much. With that in mind, I just wanted to bring in Mr. Sengiyumva in, and I wanted you to sort of add, if you had any comments to add about the political-economic relationship. I like to always think of things in historical terms, and after liberation, Africans were free of colonialism, but then straight after we jumped into neocolonialism and neoliberalism, when I see the ongoing crisis of Congolese minerals, it is really tied to neoliberalism and how much more the first world is more and more dependent on the resource of the third world, creating a system, like Mr. Bahunga said, of transnational war economy. Here in Canada, we call it the MICUMAT, the Military Industrial Congressional something. But it's a big industry in which war is the main theme. And so I wondered, in your history, especially if there's a way to explain Habyarimana said no and Kagame said yes, the minerals still existed during your time. Why was the exploitation not quite as apparent?
Yeah, no, it was.
Interesting.
It was. I think I need to remind you that when Congo became independent in 1960, the then commander of the Congolese army, which was called Force Publique, wrote on the blackboard in front of his office. He wrote that before independence equals after independence. That is basically meaning that, in fact, nothing has changed. Only the flags flying about things have changed. In the 60s and early 70s, Congo was a booming economy. But Congo was about to achieve industrial stability. And the Western interest could not allow that, because that would give Congo a say in the bargaining, while bargaining the price of copper or cobalt. And they started sabotaging the mining industry, and it collapsed. And as it collapsed, it denied the government the resources needed to be present on all Congolese territory. So the issue of the absence of government authority, especially in the east of the country, is predicated on the insufficient government resources to be present especially in the north and the South Kivu, but also the incentives received by the governments of Rwanda, Burundi, and Uganda, the small countries neighboring Congo. The other countries, Congo has about, I think, 9 or 10 neighbors. They are all large countries. Right. Zambia, Tanzania, Angola, these are large countries which cannot be influenced as easily as Rwanda and it can be. And the other small country is Congo-Brazzaville, which is a preserve of France. So the open areas for foreign influence are Rwanda and Burundi, who have structurally weak. They cannot balance their budgets. So they need budget assistance. And this assistance comes with strings
attached.
Okay, and so that is part of what is encouraging instability in Eastern Congo, and also we need to bring out the fact that in my first intervention, I spoke about the political processes. Now we have been seeing talks between different stakeholders, Rwanda process, Nairobi process. The main factors driving instability are absent in these negotiations, and these stakeholders are the powerful Western interests. They need to be around the table for this.
So if I may ask you a question on that. You're saying no matter how many talks between Congo and Rwanda themselves, if the foreign interests who are behind the scenes pushing everything are not sitting at the table as well, we cannot have a peaceful solution, or we cannot easily find solutions.
Yes, because you see, Kainde, when these I can call them puppet government, because we know how they come in power. The moment they don't deliver the goods, a leader gets overthrown. It has happened to Mobutu. It has happened to Habyarimana and Karyamira and all these people. It has happened to President Laurent Désiré Kabila. If you deliver the goods expected to run Western factories, they get rid of you. And they find somebody in your country who is readily accepting to take the offer. That is to be helped into state power, is to take into state house on the condition that you promise to do their bidding or their willing. And with the understanding that the moment you are not delivering the goods, you are done. They can get somebody else. And the instability we are experiencing, it is not that we Rwandans or Congolese like to get to each other's throat. No, there are very strong incentives, and peace cannot come about if these powerful interests would not want to let go of Congo, and they cannot. They cannot, because Congo is...
they cannot survive without Congo.
And Congo would survive, but it is a reservoir of...
No, I meant the Western foreign interests. They cannot survive without the raw materials from the Congo.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, the question becomes, what do we close? Do we close our factories? Or do we have a regime change in Kigali, in Kinshasa, in Bujumbura? This is the question. And we cannot resolve this question without these powerful Western interests around the table.
Thank you. With that in mind, I do have a question for Mr. Bahunga. We've been speaking about this concept of state formation, and the more you've spoken, the more I understand that the leadership is almost co-opted, or the leadership class in the region is co-opted. But I want to know, how can you create healthy nationalism within the everyday people on the ground? Because so many successful revolutions have required the everyday people to see themselves as part of that change. Currently, we have like tribal, there's a tribal theme within this conflict that keeps that apart. But how do you see a peaceful solution? For me, requires the people to be woken up and for them to understand their value, not only in their land, but in whom they are and their cultural history. So I suppose that's my question. How can we create healthy nationalism in the Great Lakes region to fight this economic warfare?
Thank you so much. One, I think the question will allow me to answer, which is why I answered this question, said, why I think we have Yarimana and we do something, but I think the key issue is that we have also to understand the question of the Great Lakes region and the impact of the end of the Cold War.
Yes.
But during the Cold War, there was, for instance, the Congo was used by the West to fight the East, which was supporting Angola.
Yes.
And so after that, the competition, ideological dominance, when it ended, then the issue was about human rights, democracy. So Mobutu was no longer useful for the Cold War. So they asked a question on him about human rights. And I tell you one thing, that there's the ambassador of the US ambassador Richardson, when Kabila had not Kabila, it was Rwanda, and he told Mobutu, he said, it is time over. We don't want to be pulled in the Strait of Kinshasa. Can you please leave? And he seemed to have said, he's written in the book, A Continent for the Taking, he said, we have worked together for the last 25 years. Are you now dropping me now? They said, yes. And then the head of security was in Rwanda, he met his counterpart, the CIA, and he asked him, how would you drop us for a communist like Kabila? He answered him, he said, who told you he's our friend? Because he was there for 1 year, replaced by his son. And for Rwanda also, I can tell you for Rwanda, if you look at a report of the World Bank report 1989, Rwanda is taken as a role model for good management of the economy. But then the time had come to change the political configuration of the Gettysburg region. And of course, Habyarimana was not ready, that's what I think, to go along the way and or moving probably Mobutu or collaborating. So there was a force for the RPF. We had co-opted, which was eyeing, I think we are just a collateral damage for Rwanda, but move over to the next, which is Congo. So I think that's the link. So why? And because the manner of dealing with foreign policy is different. For Habyarimana, it was rather cooperation other than aggressive occupation. You remember during the time there was CPGL, and I was so glad Sisaje talked about it recently. The Economic Committee of Great Lakes, which was Rwanda, Burundi, and Zaire at that time. CPGL, Committee of Great Lakes. And one of the issues was to agree on free movement of people and goods. We had also formed what the KB or Kagere River Basin Organization, where we had Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, and Burundi. So the whole policy was different in the sense that while the present government, Kagame, said we have to go to defend our kin and the kith in the Congo, the policy was, let us agree on free movement of people and goods. When it came to economic cooperation, it was let us have free exchange rather than saying let's go take over. So that's the big difference, the foreign policy of Habyarimana and the foreign policy of the present current government in Rwanda, which even claims is that some parts of Congo we are part of Rwanda, as I was saying, want to establish the borders between the two countries. Now, you are asking me now, what do we do to bring that nationalism? I think Congo is people have actually underestimated the national spirit of the Congolese. Not only Rwanda, but also the Western countries. They used to say that Congo does not exist. All the tribes live next to another. And I suspect that when Rwanda went in, what they had in mind from the very beginning to take over Eastern Congo, Balkanization. And there is some element to it. Because I was reading that the advisor or the Assistant Secretary of State for Africa, Walter, during the time of Bush Jr., he was saying that Congo has to be dismantled. There is another gentleman called Ambassador Peter Palm. He was in 2012 when M23 attacked for the first time, wrote an article, New York Times, saying that was to save Congo, exit fall apart. This gentleman came to be the special envoy of the US appointed by Trump from 2018 to 2020. So there seems to be a kind of, I don't know whether the deal with the RPF project, and some of the people in the West who thought that actually Congo would better be managed if it fell apart.
The Yugoslavia method.
I think now the people didn't expect Congo to be what it is. And again, when you come to in the Congo, as I was saying, the two invasions of Congo by Rwanda and Uganda, 1996, 1998, it was a crime. It was the war crime. It was not only war crimes, but a crime of aggression. Nobody ever questioned that. And actually, when the Congo wrote to the UN, they tabled a motion to call Rwanda and Uganda aggression. Remember, they had called the forces of Zimbabwe. They refused to. I think UK and the US to use the word aggression, and they used the word when they put calling invited the forces and uninvited the forces. That's what it was.
Yeah.
To avoid calling it aggression. So but the point is, who actually, first of all, who funded that, and who wanted to have the capacity 2 years after the war to have that capacity. Now, as I was saying, and then since 1998 up to this day, there has been a kind of a policy of the neighbors of Rwanda to keep it unstable, funding those small groups, including M23, which after 1998 was actually out to come off when Kabila sent away Rwandan forces. They formed RCD, Rassemblement Congolais pour la Démocratie, which was replaced after when it didn't work out by CNDP, Congrès, National pour la Défense du Peuple by Nkunda. When it didn't work, he started M23, which is actually, all these are emanations of the manipulation of the Rwandan government to keep control of that area. And that's how to see it. Now,
thank you.
What I'm saying actually, that's why they were saying, and that's why I'm very glad about what they have to do. I think I'm very glad that the authorities in the Congo now understand the stakes at play. I told you I was listening to one of the ministers saying actually the key issue is not to bring people from outside, is to have the presence of the state instruments of power in every part of the Congo, which has been lacking for the last 20 years. And that's why you see the formation of the new army, professional, well paid, and big enough to control the area. That's the second answer, which I think is up to now. When during the war, Tshisekedi was voted 23% of the votes, whether they agree or not, but at least nobody contested that he was the best. And it was on the ground that they have Congo DRC must regain its power, must regain its actually its image must be restored, and I think they're working on it.
I do too. So I've seen such a change in their pride of being Congolese, and that's why I had asked that question, because I can see that there's a change in the steps of building nationalism and building direct cooperation with the state within Congolese society, I see. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Bahunda. I wanted to ask Mr. Sengiyuva the exact same question about creating healthy nationalism, but I also want to add, with Rwandan's history of historical aggression towards Eastern DRC, are they ever at risk of having that reverse balkanization happen to them? More and more as this goes, I really do wonder, not only will the conflict spill over Rwanda, but does Rwanda risk also losing some of its territory if a nationalism can be created that unites both the people in Western Rwanda and the people in Eastern DRC? So those are my two questions. how do you think the spillover would affect Rwanda, and how can we create a healthy nationalism for that region?
Ms. Kainde, before going into that one, I want to give you
Yeah, of course.
a scale of values, of labor value, which drives violence in Eastern Congo. As you know, many factories in North America have moved to Southeast Asia, in India and Bangladesh. Labor here in America is $15 an hour, and that amounts to $90 a day. When you move the factory to Bangladesh, the labor is paid $2 an hour, and if you count 8 hours days labor, that makes $16 down from 90. Now, if you take that to Eastern Congo, where you have child labor, where you have forced labor, and where you have non-industrial extraction of minerals, you get a value of $2 a day. $2.
Oh, wow.
Now, from 90 to $2 a day, you see the powerful forces, labor forces, which drive violence in East Congo. And with that in mind, Ms. Kainde, the president of Congo is unable to remove the incentives which are being given to the small East African states of Rwanda or Burundi or Uganda to stop violence in Eastern Congo, because the president of Congo cannot offer conditions which would cost the West less than $2 a day.
And would that lead him to what you were saying, how if a leader does not deliver, he is removed?
Of course. But when he cannot deliver, the West would drive in social unrest, and you know how it ends. Social unrest usually removes the government. Okay. Now, concerning the Rwanda's persistent aggression in Eastern Congo, as I said, it is driven by unseen powerful hands, and the risk for Rwanda are there. If another more powerful hand can help Congo to drive Rwanda out, I don't think the war would stop at the borders. And Rwanda is not a large territory. It is, as Justin has told us in this conversation, North Kivu itself is about 3 times the size of Rwanda. 3 times. Yeah, that is absolutely more than 2 times the size of Rwanda. So Rwanda can lose even its nominal independence in the process. If Rwanda gets conquered, it can lose even its nominal independence, and that would be a disaster for Rwanda and for Rwandans and for the entire region. I'm concerned that the international community is not paying enough attention to the international to the humanitarian crisis which has befallen North Kivu. They have about 2 million displaced persons. That is about the population of Toronto.
You know, well, as you speak for this, let me bring you in another question so that you can round it up. But why does the mainstream media seem to overlook the humanitarian crisis? You just said 2 million people, and it's reminding me about how the news cycle right now is constantly speaking about Gaza and their lack, their famine and they're in siege. But the people of Eastern DRC are in the same conditions. What do you believe is the reason why there's never comparison to the crisis in Ukraine and Gaza as you were headed there?
It's because it would be you want to have the West shoot their own feet. They would not. Yeah, because they control the media. Yeah. They control the media, and they cannot be crying foul to what they are doing in Eastern Congo, encouraging violence for profit, and it appears that the predicament of Black people in Eastern Congo are not valued enough, like, say, the population of Gaza or the population of Ukraine, because these people have no role. They have played no role in bringing upon themselves this crisis. They are innocent. They are peasant farmers. They just grow cassava and beans, but many of them don't know that these cassava and beans and crops are sitting on strategic minerals. They don't know. They are not aware, and the least they deserve is compassion. And I would want the West to show themselves to be much more compassionate about the plight of these people who are victims, and also, in order to end this crisis, to accept mutually beneficial exchanges. That is, to value the minerals of Eastern Congo at their real value, instead of taking these minerals on looting or pillaging conditions. That is what I need to say about this one. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Bahunga, same to you. I just wanted your comments on how you see any spillover into Rwanda from this crisis, and why the humanitarian crisis is not, the mainstream media ignores it. Your point of view, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think there are two things. I think the issue of personalities. It is possible, not even impossible, but personality is actually quite important to analyze their characters. Tshisekedi and Kagame. I think I tend to think that, and he says it publicly, Kagame doesn't fear war. He likes war. Then he is an expert in war. And whereas for Tshisekedi, he says, if I can avoid the war, I'd better not do it. So there are two people who are completely different. One who enjoys fighting, who doesn't care about the loss of lives. If he did, he would care about what dying in the Congo, in the war happening now. So one way, I think many Congolese would say that, and I think he agrees also, he will not have peace in that part of Africa or the region when Kagame is still in power. There's a conviction about that. So some are saying, why don't you walk over when you can? Because I think he's in the process of training a real professional army. And act next Rwanda, pure and simple. The other option is, why don't we help Rwandans help themselves? But they say you can't export revolution. And there is those people who suggest that they say the level of tyranny reflects at what level people are prepared, or how much they value their freedom, and then to make necessary sacrifices to get that freedom. So how do we, meaning actually, people are saying, why don't we, Rwandans themselves, do that? Why do it? But I was saying there are two options. Some are saying, we don't know which one is going to win. Well, it's Sekedi, who says, let's avoid what you can, and probably help change happen from inside other than ourselves. Or those who say, let's walk over and end the problem. That's the first part of the question. The second, I go further and say the catastrophe in the Congo, according to the official figures, I heard from the president himself, more than 10 million people have died in the Congo because of this wars. It was 1993. 10 million. That's the population of Congo, Mauritius, Botswana, about 5 or 6 countries in Africa. And you have 7 million internally displaced persons in the Congo. 7 million. And which have been added the numbers that President was talking about, for this recent displacement caused by the current war. So the other point is saying, why the West? What do Africans know about this? What about the media in Africa not talking about it? Because some of the people, and actually that's the key, one of the key problems, that killing, when in the West see that, and Africans are not reacting, today, up to this day, I haven't had an African country condemning the presence of Rwanda troops in the Congo when there's all elements evident to show it is happening. It is the US, it is France, it is whatever, even if they help, why is not happening? So it comes to the point saying, at the end of the day, Africa don't care. Life don't matter in their way, in the value system. And one time, Museveni said, I don't agree with him on everything. He said that Africans, when they say that Europeans bring us to problems, he says, blame Europeans. He said it's like somebody who goes to the market, gets drunk, and on the way he sleeps on the west side, and the thief comes, they take his wallet. Then he goes home and tells his wife, he said, my dear wife, I was just having a rest, and someone took my wallet. He said, of course, stealing is bad, but you cannot tell me that sleeping on the street is okay. So I think Africans have to sort out their problems first. There is one video I will send it to you for some time. I thought I would send to you before to play it about Congo. He said, in the Africans in general, why do we lose 10 million? And by the way, the 10 million who have died in the Congo is equal to the number of slaves that reached the United States, just America, the same number. And took that 10 million was over 300 years. The 10 million today is only in 30 years or 25 years. And it doesn't make headlines in African press. It doesn't make headlines that the OAU, there's no condemnation. And as Museveni said, actually, I would definitely say those are the thieves. They don't care about human beings. But what about Africans? African leaders, African people? Why it doesn't arouse that sympathy? Even when, like that's the Europeans saying, people volunteers going to fight in Ukraine. How many Africans I've heard to say, let us go in the support and end this war in the Congo? So I agree that you should not, but at the same time, these things cannot happen. These minerals, we taking these minerals, go through which country? The book I say middlemen are Africans. And I sometimes compare them to during the time of the slavery. It is African local chiefs who went to the villages, captured African. So the responsibility must be shared.
Well, you were cutting out a little bit, but keep going.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's what I'm trying to say is actually, I agree with this that actually the Western players will do something, but we Africans bear a lot of responsibility in what is happening to them.
Thank you very much.
And so the in the Congo is a shame. What happening is a shame one to African, to humanity. That is happening. People can just sleep and feel that it is okay, and they start blaming someone else. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With our closing thoughts on this, I do really want to thank you. I encourage a lot of young Rwandans to always look at Congo because I don't think we can separate 1990 to 1994 from what happened. That statistic you just shared, Mr. Bahunga, is really disturbing. 10 million slaves over 300 years versus 10 million Congolese over less than 10 years or 20 years. Very, very disturbing.
1993, yes. About 30 years, yes.
Wow. There's something Mr. Sengiyumva said that actually reminded me. He's talked about getting mutually beneficial systems or approaches, and it reminded me of BRICS. And I'm not saying that BRICS is the answer, but one of the things they try to tout as their face is this concept of mutually beneficial contracts, mutually beneficial states working together. You have this, I have that. Let's exchange so that both our people can be strengthened. And so that is also what I really believe. I think Congo is sitting on wealth, and that wealth requires, mutually beneficial partners who will work with them to either create industry, to empower their own people. Yes, go ahead.
Actually, it is, when you speak of the West, I think it's all have to be very fair. All these businessmen, if they be the West or East or North or South, are the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know that now, when he went to the contact which was made between the DRC and China, there's so much corruption that the president said his government has had to go and negotiate some of the contracts. Wow. People made the millions. And even now, these minerals, the names which were identified, you had the ministers, and the one actually the Minister State of Security.
Wow.
And I think that has put on anti-corruption group. But the point I'm making is that we have not to choose masters, but to be independent. We go down to say, let's leave the West and go to Russia, let's go to China.
Yeah.
The business are the same. You have to be able to negotiate, and negotiation, it will be, I think he said it himself again, let's say it is accountability. Accountability can only happen with democratic system of government when the population can put their leaders to account. If it is not there, they will steal. You have seen even the developed countries. You remember Helmut Kohl, of the most famous German who is identified with the end of the code of the Berlin Wall. He was caught with, he was corruption. I think it was the Prime Minister of Japan. The only thing we can help stop these natural tendencies is having strong institutions which make leaders accountable.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Any other closing thoughts you have, Mr. Bahunga, and then we'll pass it on to Mr. Sengiyumva as well to give us some closing thoughts.
Yes. One, thank you. What I was saying is that you have to remember that what is happening in the Congo is the tip of an iceberg. Meaning, actually, it hides a lot of hidden interests, both local politicians who are hungry for wealth at the expense of their countries. Have got a regional dimension of countries around, and which countries actually are not very government. They are cronies which are across the systems, and not the international level. I've got multinational companies. I told you that there was 85 multinationals in the Congo that almost control their governments because they are the ones who finance many times the leaders to get into power. And that's the only way to do it is to have systems of government that are accountable, that people can bring them to account. You cannot change the natural tendency to steal or the greed, but you can put systems in place which make it more difficult for them to steal. And if they see they're stealing, they can't get away with it. I think that's the way. And for Congo, What my personal assessment when I follow the Congo is that for the last 30 years, they didn't have a national army. They're making it now. There was no president of the state. As I said 1 minute, I was saying it. So what they're trying to do is how do you create this trained professional and the police to occupy the space? But in the sense of government institutions, people would look for, they would use this vacuum to create their own armies as is happening now. But also, as he said, I mean, they said actually, he was saying, what they want to do is saying, what they want to do is to have an army in such a way that any neighbor will know that if messes up with us, in the next 48 minutes, we shall be in its capital. That's the only way they feel, as the government feeling in the Congo, they can defend themselves, not depending on SADC forces, East African forces, or mercenaries. They are conscious of that. And I think, I'm hopeful that this can happen. It's good for, not for the Congo, because I've had some tweets from our fellow Rwandans saying, why are you defending Congo? Why when they're criticizing Rwanda, I do for one thing. I defend human beings where they are. I criticize a thief or a criminal, wherever he is, whether Rwandan or Congolese. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Sengiva.
Yeah, you mentioned towards the end, you mentioned the BRICS. I strongly hope that these Eastern blocs, China and Russia, and probably also India, I strongly hope that they are not trying to create for themselves their own constituency, a rival of the Western constituency. As you know, there has been in the 70s, in the 80s, there was the non-aligned movement, which was eventually kind of dismantled because toward the end of the 90s, there were only one bloc, one domineering bloc, the Western, because the Eastern bloc had collapsed. But now, I really hope that the emergence of BRICS is a cry of revolt against unfair, unequal conditions of the world as dominated by the West and as dominated by today's system of the United Nations. So the strong desire of less powerful nations like African nations, it would be to have a world which works on principles of fair conditions of exchange, mutually beneficial conditions of exchange, and the end of bloc dominance. That is either the West or the East. Nobody wants to be dominated.
Yeah.
we don't want to dominate. We don't want to. So that would be my conclusion on today's talk, that we look for a world which would be organized around mutually beneficial terms of exchange. Thank you, Ms. Kay.
Thank you so much. I feel like I learned quite a lot from both of you today, and there was really themes of taking responsibility and stop seeing ourselves as Africans as victims. We do have a part to play, and so long as we're victims, we're always going to be waiting for a savior. So I think that's a really big lesson for people my age group. And then I also wanted to mention somebody, I forgot which one, mentioned how the end of the Cold War really changed things for the Great Lakes region. And that point, I keep coming back to it, is really, it's so true and it's very powerful. 1990, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the end, even the fact that we just had two blocks and forcing the world onto one block, we've now see the consequences of essentially having no option within a system. And that is also what I thinking about when I think about the future of the Great Lakes region. Hopefully one day I do get a chance to go there. And all I can think of is, yeah, we do deserve a chance to actually build a state, a nationhood that is safe and that is for our people. And I think people like you are a treasure because you pass on a lot of knowledge to people my generation. And we really thank you for your time and your contributions for everything. Thank you very much for spending your afternoon with me today. And thank you for everyone who's watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to your friends and others who have questions about the crisis in Eastern DRC. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Kayinde. Thank you so much.